Well, good morning and welcome to the Indiana IEP Resource Center's series, Conversation with Authors. My name is Angie McKinney and I'm one of the consultants with the IEP Resource Center. We are excited today to have Jennifer Spencer Imes with us, and she is one of the authors of Leading for All, How to Create Truly Inclusive and Excellent Schools, which I've taken a look at and has got so many good things in it. Just to start with some logistics, please know that all of your microphones have been muted and all your webcams have been disabled. Throughout the session, we would encourage you to post general comments within the chat box. It's available for panelists to view or panelists and attendees. So if you want everyone to see your comments, make sure and change the default to all panelists and attendees. If you have a question throughout the session, please post them within the Q&A, and questions will be answered throughout the session as appropriate. Today's session is being live captioned. So to enable the captions, you can click on the CC button in the lower toolbar. If you have any technical difficulties, you can contact Mark Suter and we'll put his email in the chat box. At the end of the session, one lucky participant will be selected to receive a copy of Jennifer's book. So stay tuned at the end and we'll announce the winner. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer to start the conversation about her book. Welcome.
Angela, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm coming to you from the West Coast, so it's still, the sun is just starting to rise, so the light might change as we're having our conversation here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can have a few slides to guide through this book talk, which I'm very excited about. I'm here to share with you today about a book that my wonderful co-author, Josh Flossie, and I wrote a couple of years ago. Well, just last year it was published, called Leading for All. And I want to share with you that I'm a full-time school administrator. I'm an assistant superintendent in a medium-sized district in Oregon. And I'm working every single day at that work. I'm still trying to lean into this journey and continue to make every day successful for every student in our district. And it is a journey. I'm in this work. I really don't think of myself as an author. I'm just someone who wrote our story down and our experiences. But we wrote them down for a reason, and I'm excited to share that with you today. So I want to start with a story, and this graphic really made sense to me that when we've had the same old thinking, we have the same old results. And schools have been set up in a particular way for a long time. And this idea of when students have learning needs that are maybe outside of the quote unquote average, that somehow very different and special expertise is needed to support those students. And that has sometimes resulted in students being segregated into self-contained classrooms. And that's been almost unchallenged for as the status quo for many years. And I want to step back and tell you a story, because I've been a teacher. I've taught general education, I've taught special education, I've taught a self-contained classroom, and I did a good job. I worked hard for those students, and I know our teachers that are working in those kinds of classrooms are doing really great work now. However, the system isn't set up in the best way for children. Let me talk to you about a student of mine named Anna. Anna's mom came to me 10 years ago. Anna was going into kindergarten, had just started kindergarten in our district. Anna was a student who was served on an IEP, and her mom was very excited about her being at her neighborhood school, included in kindergarten with everybody else. That was everyone's intention. And the year had some challenges to it. And we still had an old system where most of our deep expertise around supporting students who had the kinds of learning needs that Anna had were in self-contained classrooms. And so for many reasons, we decided she needed to go to a different school so she could receive that support that she needed. This made her mom very upset, understandably so. And she ended up in my office, emotionally sharing with me how this was not her dream for her daughter, and she didn't think it was right. And to be honest, I agreed with her 100%. And at that moment, I committed that we needed to change. It should not be that students have to move somewhere else to get the resources they need. It should not be that our classrooms can't embrace the variability and diversity of having all students be supported in the classroom. So we got busy. We set down some key goals and things to focus on to change our school district. These were our big areas of focus: improving our instructional practices, creating inclusive cultures, and increasing student voice. You can see some of the things that we wrote down under each of those. One of those in the green section is that every student's needs should be met at their neighborhood school and be supported in the general ed classroom. We didn't know quite how we would get there when we wrote that down after my time with Anna's mom, but we knew it was the right thing to do. So we developed goals and these focus areas and began moving with great intention around every hiring decision, every planning decision, every professional development being related to one of these areas. And we have seen some tremendous, tremendous results. This is not my best picture and it's a little blurry, but I put it up here just as this was sort of a turning point for me, which got us to take the time to write this all down in our book, Leading for All. As we started to have some success in doing things differently at a district level, and I think that's really what was different for us. We knew many people that were working hard to be inclusive at the classroom level or at the school level, but at least in our area, there were not any districts really doing it at the district level. And so we really started leaning into that hard. This little very bad clip here is from a reporter from Seattle, King News. Her name is Susanna Frame. And she was doing a report, an investigative journalist report about how students with intellectual disabilities were very segregated in the state of Washington, and how that was detrimental to the students who experienced disability and to the rest of the students in the school in missing out on that diversity. And she was looking for a district that was committed to inclusion and had actually made the steps to not have any self-contained classrooms anymore, to ensure that all students' needs were being met at their neighborhood school. And she came and interviewed us. And I share that just that it was a turning point for us, that we found many people were interested in how do you do this? And that's what inspired us to write this book. I just wanted to share one graph that's in the book is about how do you know that you're making a difference and that you're seeing results as you shift to being an inclusive school district. Mostly you hear amazing stories about children's lives who are enriched, whose experiences are different, who are connecting in broader and deeper ways. But this was one quantitative way that we were able to track our progress as well. This graph on the blue bars, that is our district's graduation rates, four-year graduation rates in general for all students. And so you can see we're a district that's been, had a high graduation rate for a long time. And This yellow bar is our state's overall graduation rate. So our district has been performing above the state average for quite some time. This orange bar is our district's students served on IEPs, graduation rates. So what you can see is that over these years, our district graduation rates have gone up, and our students with disabilities graduation rates have gone up, and that gap has started to close. And that's what we want to do in the work of equity and inclusion, is to close those gaps, and to raise what they call sort of the rising tide for all ships. And that's why we titled our book, How to Create Truly Inclusive and Excellent Schools for All. We want to keep that rigor and engagement for all students, including our students who experience disability. And it's possible. And we've experienced that. And we're continuing to work on closing that gap even more. So in our book, Leading for All, we talk about sort of the Simon Sinek's golden circles that he talks about, where we start with our why. Why do we need to change as schools in America? Why do we need inclusion? It's really interesting because there's very few things in education where the research lines up so clearly that it's much more effective to be inclusive. It's more effective for the academic gains for students who experience disability, for the social, emotional, and independence gains. It also shows neutral or positive academic gains for students who don't experience disability. We have a lot of theories around that, and I've seen those in practice, that as you do this work about not just taking a student out of a self-contained classroom and putting them in a general education classroom, that's not what we're talking about. Yes, that, but then changing the way we teach so all students have entry points into the instruction and have a real sense of belonging in the classroom. So that why is about the research that says it is the right thing to do. It's about a sense of social justice, that all students deserve to belong. It makes all of our teachers better when they figure out how to teach to students that have significant learning needs. It really helps them become better teachers. And it requires teamwork and collaboration in deep ways that, again, helps us all be better in our classrooms. We, in this book, also go into quite a bit of the how, like what are some of the underlying principles that we are invested in. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of photos here. This is one of the parents in our district who has become a dear friend of mine, an amazing advocate and supporter. And the reason I wanted to pull this picture out is it's a symbol. And when you talk about the how has to be in collaboration with all stakeholders. So our parents, and this parent was here reporting to our school board. Our school board is invested in inclusion. Our parents are invested in inclusion. Our community is invested in inclusion. We now have some parents, not only of students who experience disability that are moving to our district because they want inclusion for their children, which, side note, is another reason why we wrote this book, because you shouldn't have to move to have your child included. We should all be doing it. But the other component is that we have some families of children who don't experience disability that are moving because they know that diversity, that culture of inclusion and belonging will help their children be great thinkers and compassionate people. So we talk quite a bit about that how here. And then also in the book, we get into some specifics about the what. So this picture over here of a couple, this is just a snapshot in a day in a fifth grade class during some math instruction where students are working together. We talk about some of those key instructional practices that we are continuing to work on with our teachers, some of the ways that you set things up to allow the principles of universal design for learning, the principles of a workshop model that really set the stage for that inclusive and excellent school experience that we want for all children. So in this book, you're going to find a lot of stories, stories about students, as I started with today, stories about students, how they change their own constructs about who they are as learners when they belong. I was just thinking about, as we've been moving forward in inclusion, we've also been thinking about things like our preschool experiences and then our post-graduation experiences for our students, and really trying to work on inclusive college and stronger career opportunities for students. And we are partnering with our local community college and a local four-year university to try to, make this movement, which is, another big ship to steer higher education. But we had a student who had never envisioned themselves going to college, and their family never envisioning them going to college. And as we made this shift and this student was participating in classes at the local community college, they talked about what happened that year at Thanksgiving when they were connected with family that they hadn't seen for a while. And the family, were like, "How are you doing?" to this young adult who experienced developmental disabilities, and how excited and surprised the family was when the student said, "I'm going to college." And what that did for that student's self-confidence and sense of belonging in that family was really powerful. We also have included some of our key frameworks. I shared with you before our focus areas framework. We also developed a framework called the 7 components of inclusive and equitable classrooms. It's become a touchstone for all teachers. Like, what do we need to pay attention to when we're setting up our classrooms in terms of culture, in terms of physical space, in terms of expectations, in terms of relationships that make this work for students, for all students. And you'll find frameworks like that 7 components of inclusive and equitable education and classrooms in this book as well. I think what I've been really proud to hear, and my co-author Josh has been proud to hear as well, is that there have been many folks who have been inspired by our journey, which we try to share with some of the messiness that comes with it as well. It's not all, we learn from our trial and errors as much as we've learned from our successes. And knowing that wherever you are in the journey towards inclusive schools, take that next step. Take that next step. Keep moving it forward. There's no reason not to, except it's the way we've always done it. We know it's the right thing to do. We know it can be done. And we hope in this book to inspire you to keep moving, whether you're a parent advocate, whether you're a district leader, whether you're a teacher, there's something in this book for you. Also, we have been so inspired hearing about others and their journeys. We don't think that we're unique. And we, in fact, hope more and more that we're less and less unique, that we're just become run of the mill, because every school district is finding their own journey towards inclusive and excellent schools. One of the things that has been shared or asked of us many, many times is, what is the professional development that you provide for inclusion? And, is there a training we can get for that? And that always stumps me a bit, because we're talking about everything about how we teach and set up for children. So no, it's not, there's no canned training that I know of for inclusion, but instead a move to have inclusive thinking built into every aspect of our professional learning within the school and the district. An example of this, a couple of years ago, we were working with our middle school social studies and language arts teachers, and they were going to be doing some planning of units on this during the summertime. So our learning specialists, those are our special education teachers, did some planning ahead of time with the people planning that workshop, because they were wanting all teachers to keep going deeper with engaging students, particularly the students with more significant learning needs, in content. And some of our teachers, it's not that they're not willing, it's just that it's still a little bit hard sometimes to know how to when you haven't experienced that yet. So for this workshop, it was a couple days event. The plan was focusing on a social studies unit around Native American studies in our area. And the learning specialist kicked off the event with a reminder about universal design for learning and those key strategies, which you can talk about, but sometimes you need to see it in action to really move it forward. So they gave that conversation. Then the social studies leader came up and said, to start this unit, every group, you're going to do what the students would do. There's a picture on your table of a group of Native Americans in a local area over different points of time. And so your job right now is to make observations, what we would call noticings and wonderings about that picture. What do you notice in that picture? And so that was the task, the content related task that would then lead to that next part of the learning targets. So then the learning specialists had set up augmentative AAC devices at every table. Some of them were simple switches. Some were very complicated LAMP or Proloquo2Go type speech devices. And they told those social studies teachers, you need to make your observations, your noticings and wonderings using only the AAC device at your table. The teachers were like, what? But that opportunity gave them the chance to play around with those devices, kind of demystified that silo of, oh, special ed technology is someone else's role, but I can touch it too. And really got them thinking about even a student who's at those most emerging language skills, where maybe they're using a 1 or 2 step switch, they can still make observations and participate in this content of social studies. It was one of the most powerful PD opportunities I've seen. They kept those themes going throughout the week and had a number of different activities where they just kept, as you're planning these units, how are you thinking about those students who are at very high cognitive levels or content levels in this work? And also, how would you think about including those students who are most emerging in their communication? It was so powerful. And it's just one example of embedding inclusive practices and the content in the professional development. That's really the way to move this work forward. It's not a standalone PD. I'm pretty passionate about this, as you might have noticed, and I'm excited that Angela has shared that we might have some time for questions, and I really want to be supportive to what your questions might be. But I did want to just note a couple of things here. First of all, there's a QR code if you're interested to going to the Corwin website, which is one place that you can find our text. Also, I have discovered I was never a Twitter person. I didn't even know what Twitter was. And then when we published this book, I decided to make an effort to try to connect more with educators and parents and self-advocates who are interested in inclusion. And it's been quite a journey and really interesting on Twitter. I've connected with people in Australia and New Zealand and all over the world that are interested in these same constructs and sharing stories, inspiration, challenges around how to transform our schools into more inclusive places that are full of excellent learning for all students. So if you are into Twitter, please look me up there. It's a really interesting place to be able to interact. If you had very specific questions or thoughts, I'm more than happy to connect with you via email as well. So I'm going to pause right there and check in with Angela to see where we are in terms of potential questions.
And I don't have anything posted yet, but my brain is just spinning with questions. So until somebody else types something in, I'll pick your brain on this stuff a little bit. What I know it took time to get the results. It took time to get the improvements that you saw in your data. In those early years, what were the biggest roadblocks that you encountered?
It's a great question, and it's something to think about and to be prepared for, because transformational change doesn't happen overnight. You're right, and really, I think. Let me pause and say one thing. I don't know a single educator or parent out there that says they're not for inclusion. At some level, that they don't believe that all kids can learn, and that they think there's really benefit for inclusion. And yet what I've discovered is there's maybe a gap between that statement of belief and then the actions that we set up within our schools around how we serve students. And that gap is what we need to uncover. Because when a student, say, for example, is not communicating in typical ways, maybe struggling with some adaptive skills, it is so easy to say, gosh, maybe they need to be over here where there's someone with more expertise, where there's less distractions, where they can focus on these other sorts of goals. And so yet we know the research tells us that's not the most effective thing. Being connected and well supported in a general education setting with great instruction and strong peers is more supportive. So the early on was, I think, identifying where are those, what's in that gap. So one of the things that's in that gap is all of them were very understandable as we peeled them back. So first of all, you have some general education teachers who say, I was not trained for this. I did not have a single class about how to support a student with autism. That is true for many of our teachers. And so I think we need to approach our teachers with a great deal of grace and compassion and reality, and go, oh my goodness, thank you for sharing that. And how do we help you come along and fill some of those expertise gaps, but also realize students are more alike than different. And when you start to look at their strengths, and then you still have that learning specialist with that deep expertise in, say, autism to partner with you to help you understand those other components. But the basic needs of students are the same: to be connected, to feel welcomed, to be engaged, to be interested in the content, and to have to feel success. Those needs are the same, whether you're a student who experiences autism, a student who experiences Down syndrome, or a student who experiences typical third grade. I don't know. So I think that's one of the things to be aware of, and that has taken time. Early on, it just takes time to get everyone into that shared vision. So that was one of the barriers. One of the ways we've been addressing it is just constant messaging, constant sharing about why this is important, and bringing people into that loop. The second is our hiring processes have really shifted. Every single person who's been hired in our district for the last 7 years, part of their hiring process is being asked deeply about their beliefs around all students' belonging and inclusion. Every teacher, whether they're teaching math or PE or special education, whether they're a building principal, even our business manager now is asked about that. So it's really a whole system belief. One of the second barriers that maybe I didn't anticipate as much was how our learning specialists or special ed teachers who had different kinds of roles, everyone's role had to change, right? So in the old model, we had some teachers that were kind of resource room teachers at the buildings who maybe worked with students with a certain, level of impact of need, perhaps. And then we had students or teachers who focused on, a general learner profile, maybe life skills or autism, social communication, or behavior. And they developed some really deep expertise in those components. And it's really important expertise and we need it. So we had to work about how do we share that expertise in different ways, value it, allow those teachers to lead professional development around the things they have developed really important expertise around, but also we chose value of relationship, and how that holds together there. So really being compassionate with your special ed teachers as their roles change, again, bringing them in the conversation, listening to them and working with them and letting them help co-lead. Those were two of the big ones. I know we're getting short on time, so I'm going to pause right there. I could go on, but I'll stop.
Thank you so much. And that was very helpful. But thank you for taking the time in a super early morning for you to chat with us about your book. And I think a lot of people on here will look forward to reading it. But the person who probably gets to read it next is Jenny John. So this has got your name on it, Jenny. Jenny, I'll put my email in the chat, and if you would email me your mailing address that you want this sent, I will get this out to you later today. Thank you everyone for participating today, and we'll see you next time on Conversations with Authors.